Let us now talk about measuring relative humidity, which is about measuring the amount of water vapor in the air. I will introduce you to the instrument used to measure relative humidity and how to use it. We measure relative humidity using a sling psychrometer. It consists of a dry bulb thermometer and a wet bulb thermometer. The wet bulb thermometer is covered with a wick or cloth gauze at one end. This is a diagrammatic representation of the sling psychrometer. The dry bulb thermometer is on the left and the wet bulb thermometer is on the right. You would notice that the wet bulb thermometer has a wick or cloth gauze at the bottom. And just before we use it, we dip it into water to wet it. Let us now watch a video on how to use the sling psychrometer.
Over how to use a sling psychrometer. Sling psychrometers can come in lots of different shapes and sizes. They can be cheap like the ones that we have here, or they can be nice hard plastic with built-in thermometers. To begin with, you take the wet bulb thermometer and dip it in water. You spin the sling psychrometer around. While you're doing that, the water is evaporating off of the wet bulb. You then read the thermometers. The dry bulb, in this case, read 24 degrees Celsius, while the wet bulb read 21 degrees Celsius. If we were to look at what that calculated at, it would calculate to a relative humidity of 76%. This compared pretty well to our 62%, which we calculated with the GLX probe. In case you missed,
So how do we use a sling psychrometer? First, you would dip the wick of the wet bulb in water. Then you would swing the sling psychrometer at a steady pace or comfortable pace far away from your body. Water would evaporate from the wick as it is swung. After 1 minute, stop swinging and record the temperature of the wet bulb. Repeat steps 1 to 3 until you get the same temperature for 2 consecutive times. Then after that, you can record the temperature of the wet bulb. Read and record the dry bulb thermometer after that. Then calculate the difference between the wet bulb temperature and the dry bulb temperature. This is known as the depression of the wet bulb. With these readings, we can refer to the conversion table to determine the relative humidity. So in order to determine relative humidity, we first need to read the dry bulb and read the wet bulb temperature. From the diagram, the dry bulb temperature is 28 degrees Celsius and the wet bulb temperature is 25 degrees Celsius. Let us put this down. So the dry bulb temperature is 28 degrees Celsius and the wet bulb temperature is 25 degrees Celsius. We can then calculate the depression of the wet bulb, which is the difference between the wet bulb temperature and the dry bulb temperature, and the difference is 3 degrees. Let us bring these readings to our conversion table. So these are the readings in this yellow box. And here is the relative humidity conversion table. Relative humidity, as stated at the top, is measured in percentage. We will need the depression of the wet bulb value, which is 3 degrees Celsius. That is the difference between the wet bulb temperature and the dry bulb temperature. We will then read down the column. We will also need the dry bulb temperature, which is 28 degrees Celsius. I will then read across the conversion table. The number where the two readings intersect will be the relative humidity. So in this case, the relative humidity is 79 and the unit is percentage.